Yo Internet, welcome back to part 2 of the update on the S197 Coyote swap, where we're going to cover all the wiring that I've done to this car. All the wiring. Cover that in a pretty good detail. I know it's been a while since our last update, and I've done the fuel system things and all the wiring. The video ended up being way too long for I think one sitting, so in part 2, which I'll release like a day after, the fuel system will be all the wiring that I did. Now, time that we got the fuel system all done is to start with the wiring. So first thing we're going to do is kind of, it's probably one of the longest wire harnesses I do have to make, which is I guess 36 inches is going to be just enough, maybe if not even short. So anyway, this is the MAF harness from Ron Francis. So I'm going to kind of hook it up to the MAF and kind of build my own harness. Probably going to loop it. I was thinking about looping it in here and getting it to the body connector, but as you can see, it's going to have to go over there if I want to make it clean. It actually comes up short. So I might bring it around to the engine, which I don't know if I'm a fan of, but I'll show you which way I go once I decide. One thing I wanted to touch on is that we're only using 4 wires from this harness, because this is for the 05 to, I think, current Mustangs actually. So we're not even using the 2 outside wires. I have these labeled myself. This is not how they come. So this is from my own research and the spreadsheet, which I will be plugging a lot today, that I know which wires have to go where, which pin, which color it's actually going to go to on my used PCM body connector, which I suggest going. So I have which pin it's going to, they're all going through the body connector, and what color that wire is. So this is all pre-labeled months ago, but it's going to come in handy now, and you can kind of take this on your strategy if you want to not use a control pack. So after a little further review, I feel like kind of sneaking it around in here to be my best bet. I also forgot that I have a bunch of wire length coming off of the body connector. I grabbed that after off camera. So I'm gonna have, the length to work in here. I'm just gonna have to, find it. That's also labeled with the help of my spreadsheet. A little plug again. But yeah, so what I'm gonna do, I already, the 2 outside wires I cut somewhere down here and shrink wrap the ends of them and then tape the ends. I'm gonna add some conduit similar to like this stuff, make it all look factory, come in through here, and then I can finally put the radiator cover in and have that kind of buttoned up the way I want to. And you notice I got the JLT intake on there, and start wiring this thing. So this is probably going to be one of the easiest circuits to add, because this was usually part of the engine harness in the 4.6. As I've said before, it's part of the body harness in the Coyote cars. Now I think, looking at the factory wiring diagrams, this actually goes like into the headlight harness, goes through there all nice and neat, and then gets branched off into the body harness connector. This will be fine, but it also makes things a lot easier. It's gonna be one of the first circuits we make. It's kind of a good place to start. Just have you get comfortable with pin and stuff. You don't have to like take anything apart yet. I still haven't brought myself to cut that yet, or de-tape it even, but the body connector is plugged in, so I'm going to, I think before actually making the MAF connections, I'm going to de-tape that and see where everything's going to line up, because I don't want to like start having a mess right off the bat. I want everything kind of neat, because this is probably going to branch off into that direction where that one is going. So I don't want to sell myself short, so to speak, on having these wires go there, and then because I probably want the branch to come out here. So there's still a chance that I might come up short with these wires. So just a little hot tip there for the MAF side of things. Before I proceed, I'm thinking I might take the washer fluid tank out to just have easier access to everything, because I think it's one of the things I'm dreading is like getting in there and not having enough room to crimp stuff right and whatnot, because it is the bottom connector in the PCM. So I think that's what I'm gonna do. Maybe a hot tip. We'll see how it works. I'm not sure how it is to take out, but it's probably just inner fender liner and maybe a couple few bolts. I decided to take the plunge, and I know it's definitely gonna be worth it. Bumper delete, headlight delete. Next is washer tank delete. What's going on back there? Oh, look at all that angle. That's rack spacers. I'm pretty sure that's. Find those at makeitmodular.com. Anyway, let's get back to business here. So all the wiring is going to end up being right behind here where all the splices are going to end up. So I figured it'd be a good idea to get rid of all this stuff, especially the washer tank. It's going to be right in the way. So yeah, I would definitely do that if I were you. I got the fuse box unlatched. You notice there's one big connector missing, and headlights out, ready to work on over there. That missing connector is actually from the engine harness. So this is what they did for the INLINE to feed like the coils, injectors, all power, your starter feed wire is in there too, along with AC requests and whatnot. So I'm gonna be untaping that and kind of get as much wire out of there as I can so that I can reach it without having to make too many splices to the INLINE and other circuits that I gotta make. So yeah, and got some loom wire. Probably only have to use this for the mass airflow sensor. And I'm gonna make it all nice and neat. So here we go. Another item I want to point out that we're gonna have to make a harness for is, see that little Johnny there? That is the dual switch for the AC. So that was also tied into the 3-valve engine harness. So we'll have to use those wires and connector to make it all work so that we can wire it properly. I'll get more into that later and exactly how we're going to do that, because the Coyote cars didn't really have a low pressure switch. So what they used was a temp probe in the evaporator. So there's a workaround on that, and I'll cover that a little later once I get. In light of all that, what I'm going to do now is D-tape. That's the AC pressure switch connector I was telling you about. Basically gonna run that thing all the way back and basically untape this whole thing as much as I can to get as much wire out of this harness as I can. So I got most of this harness pretty much all peeled back. And like I said, I'm gonna use pretty much all these wires. I'll figure out which ones I don't need depending on where they are. There's not like such a big connector. There's what, a dozen wires in there. I can tell you right now, I bet that one's the starter feed. And then there's some wires that went to the engine harness connector. I can't say what they are off the top of my head, but I have a spreadsheet that'll tell me. And I tried unlooming the, where'd that go now? There it is. The AC pressure switch as much as I can, but I'm just gonna have to find the wires along the way because I want as much as possible. So yeah, lots of wires. And another thing I want to touch on while we're here, I labeled these while I was taking this off the 3-valve, because we're gonna use these two. This is for the speedometer. And tie that in, use the pigtail anyway to hook it up to the Coyote harness, because that's a 3-wire, this is a 2-wire. We'll touch on that later. And the reverse light switch, which might be the same, might have to just extend it, because I believe there's a connector in the trans harness for the Coyote that looks just like that, but I'll touch on that later. So I'm just gonna, now that all the tape and loom is off, I'm gonna get as much of that AC pressure wire out of there as I can, and as much as these that I can wherever these go. A lot of power feeds. So, got the dual pressure switch for the AC completely stripped. So we'll need all those wires, and those will actually just transpose right into the Coyote wiring. If there isn't any trickery there. I'll get into how to do the low pressure side and how it's all gonna work later, like I said. And now we got the, this is the C1035B connector that goes to the fuse box. So we can tell the thick wire is going to go to the starter. That's all I really know offhand. A lot of these red wires are just 12 volts with the ignition, and so on and so forth. I think I'm gonna reference my wiring diagram and try and label them all so I know which one is which. Gotta look at the connector view in the manual and see what is what and corresponds with the colors, and so I can get more prepared for there. And I still have yet to cut the body harness over here. I don't know. I'm just trying to do things right, not get ahead of myself. Kind of want to just clean up my area, you know, keep things clean. And I think that's gonna be my next step, is to label it. Touch off or touch base on how valuable these factory wiring diagrams are. So this is 07 Mustang. Here is the C1035B. And B, I believe, is I don't know, usually means body, at least on the PCM it does. You see it correlates here. And I have, good God, stuck on something. Anyway, the wire is here. Connector is upside down according to the map. So you can see the little tangs there, the tangs, so we're looking at the right stuff. And you can see all the not used and whatnot. And this is the first time I opened this page to it, because I never thought to. I just looked at the wiring diagrams, and I never had to look at this page because I didn't have this connector out. I was driving the car. But in my spreadsheet, it shows like F6, you know, stuff we're gonna have to connect certain things to, and so on and so forth. Trying to find, there is a spot, I know there's a couple things that get, you know, ignition wire and whatnot from this. So what I'm gonna do now is go get my label maker and label all these wires, so then when it goes time to get to the car, I'll know exactly where they go. By label maker, I mean some masking tape. I don't think it's necessary to get into my actual label maker that I used here, just to save time. It's just gonna take too much time. There's not that many wires to do. Not too bad, like I said. I don't even think there's a dozen wires in there. Got them all mapped out. I'll show you what they all do. Luckily, I figured red was going to be the case, but this is really fortunate that a lot of these are 12 volt ignition, because we got to power up a few circuits out here in various places. Got a ground. This will go to PCM to ground the high-speed fan relay, and then there's the low, which is this one, and then I guess correctly that's the starter output. So pretty simple. So in fact, it's like, I mean, if you count these would just give us options to not have to like tee into wires, but we'll be able to have, well, if we got to share circuits anyway, we'll be able to, you know, splice the meter off of that. So now I think I'm going to make the math harness, because everything is, let's go over here. So I didn't notice in my last video, or not last video, but earlier, had this all mapped out, and now that I know where this is gonna go, everything's gonna kind of end up in here, all the connections. So I'm probably gonna route this mess padded over here so I can get a better idea of where it's all gonna be laid out. And I forgot to mention that I'm gonna take the inline of the 4.6 that bolts in here and actually bolt it in here, have it come out like it will, so we'll be able to know. I guarantee I got enough wire over there in that harness to reach wherever everything needs to go to. Oh, we're doing it. Anyway, pretty monumental here. I did one wire. And so one thing you gotta remember with the Ron Francis wiring is that the colors don't match anything as far as the Coyote or 4.6. So it's a good idea to label them. I am adding pictures of the connectors so that you know exactly the orientation of which way the wires go. So keep that in mind if you guys are interested in purchasing the spreadsheet. So made my first checkbox. We're green on pin 2, the math. It's going to pin 47. And I'd like to thank Past Matt for bundling all the MAF wires however many months ago, so I know all my MAF wires are right here except for the 12-volt ignition, which is probably going to get from the inline over there. So made a crimp connection, shrink tube. Now we'll carry on. I had to take a quick break from the had a little visit. Someone actually from Ford while I'm working on this car about the airbag thing, because I haven't done the recall in it. And he's like, "Is that the car right there?" I was like, "Oh yeah." He's like, "Well, it looks like you're working on it," because they do like mobile services and stuff. But I just thought it was pretty funny that he just kind of walked up. Since it was noon and I was hungry, I decided to untape the 4.6 body connector that was going to the PCM. This is just a 12 volt signal, I believe. When I first converted to EPAS, or sorry, electronic rack, it needed a 12 volt power source on low amperage, so that's what that is. So I untaped it to about as far as I'm gonna need, because I want to know where the pins are. And while I was waiting for my Uncrustable that I already ate to unthaw in the sun, I also kind of mapped out how I'm gonna I need a 12 volt ignition to complete the MAF circuit, and that'll be done actually. And to see, all these red wires are actually 12 volt ignition on. These are our fan wires for the trigger. Those are gonna go to the body side. This is gonna go to the inline for the transmission connector. Same with the 12 volt all the time to the alternator. That's going to the inline to the transmission harness. And this is for AC things and a ground wire. So I was like, oh man, I didn't want to just hardwire this thing in, but I think that's gonna be okay. It's not really a hard wiring because we have the big connector here. It can all come apart. It'll come apart here, but then still humming and hawing on, because this will all kind of stay body side. So yeah, it will be okay if I hardwire this, because these are going to be hardwired, and these are going to be hardwired to other circuits that need 12 volts to the engine inline and whatnot. So that's the whole point of it. So that'll be able to disconnect at those points. And I think if I ever wanted to take the harness out, all I gotta do is take the MAF out. So no big deal. So I'm cruising along. I'm feeling really good about this. It was very daunting at first. But as I continue, like I showed you with the MAF, I put a picture so that it'll be easier to follow, because you could have those flip-flopped when you think about it, so that you can know exactly where they're numbered. So I'm gonna, once I get to that connector, I'll be adding pictures of that spreadsheet, so even myself, as I'm going, know. Like that, MAF circuit is done. Got it all loomed up. Not completely taped up. That's where it's going to branch out in the main body harness on the 5.0, and I think now I'm going to work on the trans inline connector. Well, let me scoot over here, refresh your memory on the inline connector that we're going to use to complete all those circuits. We're going to use most of these. And connect it. So yeah, probably should have thrown that. There's some shrink tubes in there, but anyway, I already got them all labeled, because you know, Victory loves preparation. And I have the trans inline connector. I'm gonna throw a picture from the manuals, and then just dial this all in. I think that's a good next place to start. I think the most I'm dreading is doing the pedal harness. Only because I gotta get my big ass in there. Luckily, my lovely Rebecca took the seat out a while ago when I was doing the fuel pump, so I gotta get in there and do some wires in there. We'll show that later, but let's do this trans business. inline, we're at the alternator wires, GenCom and Gen communication and monitor, essentially, for the alternator. There we go, these two. So they both get hooked up to the body side of the 5.0 connector to kind of regulate the alternator regulator. As you can see, those are my wires I got to hook up, and that's the end of my wire. So I'm gonna have to put an intermediate wire, unfortunately, in there. So it's if you are getting a used body connector, maybe even try and get the whole body harness so you can get more wires, because I had someone just send me this and I actually told them where to cut because I thought it'd be plenty, but turns out it's a little short. But no big deal. Use the standard crimp method that I've been using and just keep moving forward. I got to my first wire in the order I'm doing things anyway. We got 5 wires done with the trans inline. Got the alternator wires hooked up, component power, starter wire, all that good stuff. An unused wire, just shrink tube the end of it. But now I'm into the clutch pedal positions switch, which is from the body harness. So basically the car is looking for the clutch switch position, whether it's open or closed, pressed or not, and the wires end up somewhere in here. So according to the map here, it's pin 33 of our 46175B C175B connector. So like I said, the factory harness, or the factory manual connector views comes in so clutch. And so I got pin 33, it all correlates, the color, so I'm just gonna basically search for it here and then hook it up to my inline. So I found the wire I'm looking for. It's a light blue and yellow wire, so that's our clutch position switch. We're running into another short situation. I don't want to like bring the harness, open it back any further than I have to. It's just gonna be messy. So I'm just gonna cut it right about here, kind of do the 2 splice thing so that the wire can reach. It would almost reach, but I don't want to like take that shortcut. I want it to join these other wires that I already got connected with the MAF and the alternator. So I want it to go back down here and then kind of route it under, so it all reaches nicely when I tape up the loom. Luckily, remember, save that engine harness, because I've been finding all sorts of colors that work and match so that it doesn't get too confusing. I did that with happened to find a blue and orange wire in there and a purple wire for the alternator wires that matches what you need. So yeah, look at all that spaghetti. So yeah, we're So we got to the point where I got to deal with some CAN bus wires. Now I converted this to electric rack even before the swap, but the next 2 wires on the inline are the high-speed CAN bus wires that literally are just going, their only purpose is to go to the steering rack. Now, what's not going to be straight up swapping with this is, yeah, you can get the CAN bus wires from here, but the computer also needs to send and receive those signals. So I'm not only going to have to find which wires they are, it's just a matter of actually physically finding them. I know what color I'm going to be looking for and what pin, and also locating them in the 5.0 harness and kind of making a throughway marriage, if you will, of these 6 wires. green on the transmission inline. Oh, so there's about a dozen wires or so. 3 unused here, this one unused, and it's gonna be nice and neat once I tape it all up and make a nice loom. And we even got to check off some boxes on the main body harness. So I think I'll start on that now. I lied. I'm actually gonna move on to the inline connector. For the engine harness, it's 4 wires, should be super simple. I believe it's at least a power, ground, and whatever else I jotted down in my spreadsheet. What that entails is using the inline from the Coyote car. This was actually a part of the body connector to the PCM on the Coyote. Unless there are a repair harness, but it's going to have all 16 wires in there, but this will correlate just about directly to the, actually not, but the positions of the wires are what matters, is that they're all pretty much where I don't have to repin anything or anything like that. So that's good. So I'm gonna have to figure out where all these are. I know the gray wires for the oil pressure sensor, and there's some component power, and I guess by the black wire there's ground. The thing I'm gonna have to figure out is kind of where it's gonna lay. If I'm gonna have it hang out where the 4.6 inline was and have it kind of swoop around. It all depends on, I think, what wires are gonna go where. I think there's plenty of room for it to go under here and kind of hang out with these guys. Once the engine harness is plugged in and stuff, there should be plenty of room there. But I'll figure out as I go. I'll let you know, of course. So after looking at the diagrams in my sheet, literally, I'm not sure why these wires are here. They might be for V6 things, but there's only 4 wires on the engine side, so it's not going to be missing anything. And according to the manual, that's all there is to. So literally all these wires except the gray one is oil pressure sensor. All these get 12-volt ignition wire. Super simple on that. All wrapped up. So I had to get into that, the inline for the 4.6. Eventually this will all be deleted. Still not sure where all these wires go since they don't correlate to any of the other inlines, but I'm sure that'll make sense later as I get into the actual body harness, because there's still a lot of wires to be done. So there's a little clip, fits right in there in the factory bracket there for this inline, and the 4 wires got it hooked up to power from our C1035B connector to the fuse. So used up all of my switch ignition sources for power to get power to everything else. So, but there's still, I believe, use them all. I might have to make another splice. That's okay, because we're not soldering, it's not that. So this the injector power needs power from that connector and wires. Let's see if there's anything else in here that needs 12-volt ignition. That's gonna be a crossover, it doesn't need it from there. Yeah, so there isn't many. Yeah, everything else is gonna transfer as far as what getting power from these wires. So I could actually use one of these that are powering up like the PCM or something to for that injector power wire on the 5.0 side, or I can use, like how I originally planned, was one of the wires, maybe use it because there was one I had to split, So there was 3 wires on the inline that needed 12-volt power, but I only had 2 left feeding there. So it just made, you know, where is it now? Yeah, there it is. You know, it's made the 2 go into 1. So they're on a circuit, this one's on a circuit. And I'll probably either use the injector power wires that are already in the 4.6, or use one of these, just cut it, do another splice, and one that's only being, that I haven't used to split or to power 2 other wires so that you don't overload that circuit. Just mentioned about that inline connector not knowing what everything goes to, but I'm gonna kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Here is the transducer pressure switch for the AC. The connector is down there. Now this was part of the 4.6 engine harness, but now we're going to have to make our own harness to connect to the body harness of the 5.0. And all of these wires, at least 3 of them, connected to the inline of the 4.6. I cut them, obviously, and didn't know because I knew I needed the wires. So if I were to just hook this wire up there to the, this just goes straight to there. There's no wire to really hook up to the 5.0. So I'm gonna have to make a harness, or just kind of loom it, plug it in, route it next to the mat, and plug these as I need to on the spreadsheet to get the AC working. So this is the straightforward part about the air conditioning. The dual pressure switch hooks directly, just like the 4.6, where there's no funny business. What we will have to do is on the low side, and I will touch on that later once I get to it. Down there, pressure switch. There's the wires, the only ones that are not wrapped or loomed. Routed nicely, have plenty of wires to get it to where we need. So it's kind of a hot tip. I don't think I've ever seen anyone mention that in any forums or anything on what you actually got to do, or that it was part of the 4.6 engine harness. So that'll splice straight up. I don't have a, that's not really part of it's not on the spreadsheet, but the wires all correlate to the body connector of the 5.0. And while I'm doing this, if I find out otherwise, I'll definitely let you. Well, that's day 1 of getting the wiring kind of sorted out on this. I probably spent 14 hours today, pretty much straight doing it. Probably about 75–80% done. Haven't done the math. All I can say, I shut down my laptop already, but being prepared for that, I can't stress enough how much easier and confident this whole wiring project has been. Otherwise, I would have been spending so much more time on the back end. Instead, I spent the hours figuring that out on the spreadsheet, or at least figuring it out in the first place and getting it dialed in. So that's how, still got all these wires on the 4.6 body side, and there's probably an equally amount of wires left on the 5.0 side. So maybe 80% was generous. I'm probably 65%, but it's going smooth. Yeah, so I'll get back on this probably the next day. So, and we're back. It's the next day, a little later in the day because, you know, day job things, but I'm gonna continue getting after these wires. All right, now it's the next day since the last time lapse we saw. And I have this sheet completely filled out. You can see I got a couple outliers, those are the AC, but everything is done except pedal, which I'll get to. Got everything in the spreadsheet done. We're all green except for the accelerator pedal harness, which is 6 more wires. But as you'll see, there is a whole bunch of 4/6 wires left over. So most of these, I do know where they go. This is AC stuff. This AC wire is just going right back to the 4/6, the tan and red. That's the pressure one. We already used that to directly from the switch in my own harness coming from the sensor itself. And I did find one mistake after further review. I don't remember how I found it, but the brake switch signal that I was using was actually the wrong one. So I just got to switch that, update my spreadsheet. It was basically the opposite. I hooked it up to the side of the brake switch that is 12 volts on all the time until it's switched, and the signal that I want to give to the BO or brake on off is just the opposite. And I found that it's pin 8 in the 4/6 harness. So just got to make that correction. And internet reporting from underneath the dash. So the accelerator pedal actually isn't all that bad to get to. A lot of room there. I guess I was used to the Fox with the Coyote and 3-valve pedal. So I'm gonna rip that thing out of there, do the wiring quick, get it over with. Oh, that was by far the worst I had to do under a dash. I don't know. I'm not small and that was tight, but pedal is wired. But before I fire this, or not fire it up, but power it up, I still need to figure out what all these wires are. I do know there's a brown or tan. One of these is the 7th wire from the accelerator pedal from the 4/6. 4/6 uses 7 wires, Coyote uses 6. So I'm gonna figure that out, and then I'm gonna hook up the battery and turn the key, just like that. 4/6 connector deleted, and we're all wired up. This is definitely AC things. We'll verify a little bit, but I want to tell you about the wires that got left behind here. There was 2 RX and a TX signal, 2 different wires, an airbag monitor, and a power steering switch coming from the inline. So obviously we have electronic steering, don't need that. Coyote didn't have an airbag monitor. I'm guessing it communicates with the body module and the actual Coyote cars. And as far as the signal wires, there's no connection for those at the PCM, so I just shrunk tube them, let them hang out in case we need them later. And so now, I guess I'm ready to give this a little test-a-rooski. Ignition a few times, fuel pump is starting to sound more and more normal. I think it was just didn't have fuel in it. Whoa! How about that AM radio? We'll get it one more time here. Sweet. Don't mind the AM. Well, that's where I'm going to wrap up this episode. Thanks for watching. I know we didn't get to the AC part, but I feel like I got a ton of footage and this video is going to be super long, so just bear with me on that. Please consider liking the video and subscribing, and follow this journey on swapping this S197.